The lights in the medical bay of Kelvari Station did not just illuminate. They interrogated. It was an aggressive, sterile white glare that seemed to strip away the shadow and skin alike, seeking out the flaws in the metal of the walls and the marrow of the bones. The air smelled of ozone-recycled oxygen and the sharp chemical sting of antiseptic that never quite masked the underlying scent of biological fear. Daniel Rake sat on the edge of the examination table, his boots dangling inches above the scuffed composite floor. He rubbed his face with a hand that felt too heavy, the callus on his thumb catching against the stubble on his jaw. He was tired. It was a bone-deep, marrow-level exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with the 3 weeks he had just spent hauling unstable isotopes through the fringe. "You look terrible," a voice said in his ear. It was dry synthesized and entirely unwelcome. Daniel tapped the small earpiece. "I turned you off, Patch. You attempted to place me in standby mode," the artificial intelligence corrected him. "However, your blood pressure is elevated and your cortisol levels are suggesting you are about to punch a medical professional. I reactivated myself to prevent litigation. You cannot afford a lawsuit. We have exactly 412 credits in the reserve account." "I am not going to punch anyone," Daniel muttered, glancing at the sealed door where the station physician had vanished 10 minutes ago. "I just want the clearance stamp so I can leave. Milo gets out of school in 2 hours." "You cannot fly the ship if you glow in the dark, Daniel," Patch said. The AI pause was perfectly timed for maximum irritation. "Radiation sickness is not a becoming look for a father." Daniel said, using the short, sharp command for silence. The door hissed open. It was not the physician returning for him. The sound came from the adjacent isolation unit, separated from Daniel's cubicle by a wall of smart glass that was currently set to 50% opacity. Daniel looked over. He could not help it. The figure in the next room demanded attention simply by existing. She was Risari. Even seated on the reinforced medical slab, she was massive. If she stood, Daniel estimated she would tower over him by at least 2 feet. Her fur was a deep, twilight gray, marked with darker rosettes that seemed to shift under the harsh lights. She wore a jumpsuit that had been patched and repatched the fabric, straining against the dense muscle of her shoulders. Her ears, tufted and expressive, were currently flattened against her skull in a posture of utter defeat. She was staring at a datapad in her hands. Her claws, sharp enough to rend bulkhead plating, were resting gently on the screen, but the metal casing of the device was groaning. She was crushing it. Slowly, unconsciously, she was bending the reinforced frame in half. Daniel saw the station doctor standing in front of her. It was Dr. Cora Wren. Daniel knew her by reputation. She was one of the few humans on Kelvari who didn't treat non-humans like livestock. Dr. Wren looked small and fragile next to the Risari, but her posture was rigid, professional, and radiating a profound sadness. The soundproofing between the rooms was good, but not perfect. And Daniel, having spent half his life in cockpits, listening for the subtle whine of a failing engine, had excellent hearing. "I have run the scans 3 times, Dr. Wren said. Her voice was soft, devoid of the usual bureaucratic indifference. "I am sorry. The genetic markers are conclusive." The Risari female did not move. She did not breathe. The only motion was the slow, tortured bending of the datapad in her hands. "Say it," the Risari said. Her voice was a low rumble, like tectonic plates grinding together deep underground. It vibrated against the glass, separating them. Dr. Wren took a breath. She looked at the datapad in her own hand, then back up at the giant feline alien. "No womb, no eggs, non-gestational." The words hung in the sterile air like smoke. Daniel felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He knew enough about Risari culture to understand what he had just heard. To the Risari lineage was not just biological, it was theological. It was the currency of their existence. To be barren was not a medical condition. It was an ontological failure. It was to be a ghost while still breathing. The Risari rose, the manifest on the door screen read, stared at the wall. The silence stretched thin and agonizing. Non-gestational, Rose repeated. The word sounded alien in her mouth, too clinical for the devastation it carried. She looked down at her hands. The datapad snapped with a sharp crack, the screen shattering into spiderwebs of dead pixels. She did not seem to notice. Then, she looked up at Dr. Wren. The corners of her mouth twitched, exposing the tips of long ivory canines. It was a grotesque attempt at a smile. "Well," Rose said, her voice cracking slightly, "it is no use weeping over evaporated dairy." It was a clumsy attempt at a human idiom, crying over spilled milk. But she had gotten it wrong. The absurdity of it, the image of a 7-foot warrior trying to use a gentle human proverb to cover a soul-shattering wound, was briefly, sharply funny. But the humor died instantly. It shattered just like the screen in her hands. The smile fell from her face. A sound escaped her throat, a high-pitched keen that was quickly strangled into silence. It was the sound of something vital breaking. Daniel found himself leaning forward, his own radiation test forgotten. He felt like an intruder, a voyeur at a funeral. He wanted to look away to give her the dignity of privacy, but he was paralyzed. Rose turned her head. Her eyes gold and slitted like a predator's, locked onto his through the glass. They were not the eyes of a monster. They were the eyes of a soldier who had just been told the war was over, and they had lost everything. Daniel knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror 1,000 times in the months after the crash, the months after the custody hearings began. It was the look of a being who had been told they were no longer standard, that they were broken equipment. For a second, the glass between them vanished. It was just two veterans of different wars, staring at the wreckage of their own lives. Rose stood up. The movement was fluid despite her size. As she rose, the collar of her jumpsuit shifted. Daniel blinked. There was something around her neck. It was not jewelry. It was a thick, metallic band, dark and matte, hugging the fur of her throat. But as she moved, a series of lights beneath the metal surface flared to life. They were not the steady LEDs of human tech, nor the pulsing plasma of Risari engines. They were starlight. The pattern shifted, swirling like a captured nebula. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Daniel felt a sudden sharp pain behind his eyes, a headache that spiked and vanished in a microsecond. "Patch," Daniel whispered. "Are you seeing that?" "I am detecting a high-frequency signal spike," Patch replied, the sarcasm gone from his tone. "It is originating from the subject in the adjacent room." "Daniel, your heart rate just jumped 20 beats per minute." "Are you compromising your medical exam?" Rose took a step toward the door of her cubicle. Dr. Wren stepped back, not out of fear, but out of confusion. The doctor was staring at her tablet, which had begun to flash red. "Wait," Dr. Wren said. "Rose, your biosigns are syncing. What is that collar?" Rose did not answer. She looked at Daniel again. There was a desperate question in her eyes. "Do you see me, or do you see the failure?" Daniel stood up. He did not make a conscious decision to do it. His body simply moved, driven by an instinct he had buried since the war. He walked to the glass partition. "Sir," a medical droid buzzed as it rolled into his room. "Please remain seated for the decontamination scan." Daniel ignored it. He walked to the threshold where the smart glass met the open air of the corridor. Rose was stepping out of her room at the same time. They were 3 feet apart. The collar around her neck let out a sound. It was a ping, clear and resonant like a sonar pulse in deep water. Daniel stepped across the yellow hazard line on the floor. Ping. The sound was louder this time. It vibrated in his teeth. Above them, the main lights of the medical bay flickered. The sterile white turned to a harsh emergency red. "Warning," the station's automated voice announced. It was a calm, pleasant contralto that made the message all the more chilling. "Cradle beacon detected. Biological resonance confirmed. Sector 4 is now under quarantine protocols. Cradle beacon, Daniel said. He looked at Rose. She was freezing up. Her ears swiveled back and her hand went to her throat, covering the collar. But the light bled through her fingers, pulsing faster now. "Congratulations," Patch said in Daniel's ear. "You have just become a location." "What does that mean?" Daniel hissed. "It means," Patch said, "that every receiver within 5 parsecs just got a ping. And looking at the encryption keys flooding the local network, someone very powerful was waiting for it." Heavy security shutters slammed down over the main entrance to the medbay, cutting off the waiting room. The few nurses and patients in the corridor screamed and scrambled back. Rose stood alone in the center of the hallway. The red light washed over her gray fur, turning it the color of dried blood. She looked at Daniel. The despair in her eyes had been replaced by fear. "Get away from me," she growled. "You do not want to be near this." "Lockdown initiated," the station voice continued. "Meridian Quarantine Authority personnel are inbound. Please remain calm. Resistance will result in immediate sedation." Meridian Quarantine Authority. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. They weren't police. They weren't military. They were the cleaners. They were the ones who showed up when a colony had a viral outbreak, and they were the ones who decided whether to cure the population or burn the atmosphere. Daniel, a new voice, cut over the station's public address system. It was smooth-cultured and terrifyingly polite. "This is Commissioner Soren Vale." Daniel looked up at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. The red light on the lens was blinking at him. "I can see you, Mr. Rake," Vale's voice continued. "You are standing dangerously close to a Class 1 biological anomaly. I am going to ask you to step back, for your own safety, and for the safety of your son." Daniel went cold. "Leave Milo out of this." "Milo is currently at the Sector Preparatory Academy," Vale said. "He is waiting for his father. It would be a tragedy if his father was detained indefinitely for obstructing a quarantine procedure. Step away from the Risari, Mr. Rake. Walk to the north wall. Put your hands on your head." Rose looked at Daniel. "Go," she said softly. "He is right. I am a defect. Do not lose your cub for me." "It would be so easy. Just walk away. Walk to the north wall. Let them take her." She was a stranger. A giant, broken stranger who had just failed a medical exam. Daniel had a ship to fly. He had a mortgage on his thrusters. He had a 7-year-old boy who needed dinner. Daniel looked at the north wall. Then he looked at Rose. He saw the collar pulsing. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't just a machine. It felt alive. Dr. Wren appeared at his elbow. She had slipped out of the exam room during the confusion. She shoved a small data chip into Daniel's hand. Her face was pale. "Take it," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "What is this?" Daniel muttered. "The scans," Dr. Wren hissed. "That collar, it isn't just a tracker. It is a neural biological link. It is counting down, Daniel. If it hits 0 and she is still in a containment field, it will enter a lock phase." "Lock phase?" "It will rewrite her," Wren said, her voice trembling. "I do not know what it will turn her into, but she won't be Rose anymore. Meridian knows this. Vale knows this. They want the tech, they don't care about the host." Daniel looked at the chip in his hand. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because," Dr. Wren said, glancing at the camera, "I took an oath to do no harm. And what they are about to do to her is not medicine. It is an execution." The main doors hissed. Sparks flew as a plasma cutter began to slice through the lock. The authority was not waiting for them to open the door. Rose looked at Daniel. She did not beg. She stood tall, drawing herself up to her full height, regaining the dignity she had lost in the exam room. "Do not pity me, human," she said. Her voice was steady. "Just do not ignore what happens here." Don't ignore. That was the hook. That was the thing that snagged on the jagged edges of Daniel's conscience. He had ignored things before. He had followed orders. He had trusted the process. And because of that, there was a grave on a moon 3 systems away that he could never visit. He looked at the plasma sparks flying from the door. He looked at the countdown on the wall screen. 300 seconds until breach. "Patch," Daniel said. "How are the atmospheric scrubbers in this room controlled?" "They are on a localized loop," Patch replied. "Why are you planning to freshen the air?" "No," Daniel said. "I am planning to make it very thick. Can you overpressurize the decontamination fluid tanks and vent them into the main intake? That would create a foam density of 0 visibility within 10 seconds, Patch said. It would also void your warranty on this flight suit." "Do it," Daniel said. "Executing," Patch said. "I advise you to hold your breath." There was a thump from the ceiling vents. Then, with a sound like a dying whale, the decontamination nozzles exploded. Thick white chemical foam erupted into the room. It was not mist. It was a solid wall of expanding suds. In 3 seconds, the room was a whiteout. The red emergency lights diffused through the foam, turning the world into a pink, suffocating soup. "Now!" Daniel yelled. He grabbed Rose's hand. It was huge, the pads rough and warm, the claws retracted. She flinched, surprised by the contact, but she did not pull away. "Move!" Daniel shouted over the hiss of the foam. "The side door, the cargo intake." "That door is biometric locked." Dr. Wren's voice came from somewhere in the white fog. "Only authorized personnel." "I am authorized," Daniel yelled back. "My cargo is in Bay 3. They ran. It was a blind stumble through the foam. Daniel slipped on the slick floor, but Rose caught him. Her strength was absurd. She didn't just steady him. She hoisted him up like he weighed nothing. "Left!" Daniel shouted. They slammed into the side door. Daniel wiped a glob of foam from the scanner and slammed his palm against it. "Access denied," the computer chirped. "Quarantine in effect." "Patch!" Daniel screamed. "I am working on it," the AI replied calmly. "But Commissioner Vale has a very good firewall. I need 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds. Behind them, the main doors blew inward. Through the foam, Daniel could hear the heavy metallic stomp of mag boots. "Secure the target," a voice barked. It was distorted by a helmet, but the intent was clear. "Non-lethal on the female. Humans are expendable." Rose shoved Daniel behind her. She crouched, a low growl building in her chest. She was ready to fight an armed squad with her bare hands. Then, the collar on her neck flared. Ping. The sound hit the door scanner. The scanner didn't turn green. It turned blue. A deep, oscillating blue that matched the starlight on Rose's neck. The door didn't just unlock. It threw itself open with such force that the hydraulics screamed. "What?" Daniel stared. "Your ship," Rose said, her eyes wide. "It heard me." "That's impossible," Daniel said. "My ship is a rusted freighter, not a—" "Go!" she roared, shoving him through. They spilled out into the cargo loading dock. It was a cavernous space, cold and smelling of grease. Daniel's ship. The rusty Minoc sat on the pad. It was an ugly, blocky thing shaped like a brick with engines. But the cargo ramp was already lowering. The lights on the ship were pulsing. Not the standard navigation strobes. They were pulsing in rhythm with the collar. Thump, 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 thump. "Patch," Daniel said, running toward the ramp. "Did you do that?" "No," Patch said. His voice sounded genuinely disturbed. "I did not touch the ramp controls. Daniel, the ship is initiating a pre-flight sequence on its own. The core temperature is rising. It is waking up." "Get on board!" Daniel yelled at Rose. She hesitated at the bottom of the ramp. "If I go with you," she said, looking back at the station, "you become a fugitive. There is no coming back from this." "I know," Daniel grabbed her arm. "But if you stay, you become a lab rat. Get on the damn ship." She looked at him. For a split second, the alien warrior vanished, and he just saw a terrified person who didn't want to be alone. She ran up the ramp. The metal groaned under her weight. Daniel followed, hitting the retract button the moment his boots hit the deck. "Patch, get us out of here, emergency departure." "Clearance is not granted," Patch said. "Docking clamps are engaged." "Blow the clamps." "That will cost 5,000 credits and damages to the station." "Bill me!" Daniel screamed. Boom! The explosive bolts on the docking clamps fired. The ship lurched, dropping 2 meters before the repulsors caught it. Inside the cockpit, Daniel threw himself into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over the controls, muscle memory taking over. "Shields up, rear deflectors to maximum." On the view screen, the hangar bay doors were opening too slowly. "We are not going to fit," Patch noted. "We are going to make it fit," Daniel gritted out. He slammed the throttle forward. The rusty Minox surged. It wasn't a graceful exit. The ship scraped the edge of the bay doors, sending a shower of sparks cascading into the void. Metal shrieked against metal, a sound like a banshee wailing. And then silence. Stars. They were out. Daniel slumped in his seat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He checked the radar. 3 patrol drones were launching from the station, but they were slow. He could outrun drones. "Patch," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "Plot a course for the jump gate. Get us out of the system." "Course plotted," Patch said. "Daniel, I have an incoming transmission. Priority 1. Encryption level Meridian Authority." "Put it on audio only," Daniel said. He didn't want to see Vale's face. "Mr. Rake," Vale's voice filled the cockpit. It was perfectly calm. There was no anger, only a disappointed resolve. "You have made a significant error in judgment. You have kidnapped a biological asset of the Meridian Authority." "I didn't kidnap anyone," Daniel said. "She's a passenger." "She is a beacon," Vale corrected. "And you are now the carrier. Do not think you can hide. That caller is broadcasting on a frequency that cuts through subspace. Wherever you go, we will follow the signal." "Let us go, Vale," Daniel said. "She hasn't done anything." "Not yet," Vale said. "But the countdown has started. You have no idea what you have invited onto your ship. When that counter hits 0, you will wish you had left her in the medbay." The line went dead. Daniel sat in the silence for a long moment. He turned his chair around. Rose was standing in the doorway of the cockpit. She had to duck to fit. The collar was glowing softly now, a steady, rhythmic pulse. She looked at the stars moving past the viewport, then she looked at Daniel. "Thank you," she said. It was barely a whisper. "Don't thank me yet," Daniel said, rubbing his eyes. "We're fugitives. I have 400 credits a ship that thinks it's possessed, and I have to explain to my 7-year-old son why we can't go home." "Possessed?" Rose asked. "The ramp," Daniel said. "The door. My ship, it reacted to you." Rose touched the collar. "Everything reacts to this. It is." She struggled for the word. "It is loud, even when it is silent." "Patch," Daniel said. "Where is Milo?" "Milo is safe," Patch said. "I sent a drone to pick him up from the academy before the lockdown. He is currently in the sleeper pod in the crew quarters. He is asking for juice." Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His shoulders slumped. Milo was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. He looked at Rose. "Welcome aboard, I guess. Try not to break anything else." Rose looked down at her hands. "I will try." She walked out of the cockpit, moving toward the common area. Daniel watched her go. He saw the way she walked, careful, heavy, carrying the weight of a world that didn't want her. He looked at the console. The proximity alarm was flashing. The drones were falling behind, but Vale was right. They were being tracked. "Patch," Daniel said. "How long until the jump?" 3 minutes, Patch said. "Daniel, just for the record, that was an incredibly stupid thing to do." "I know," Daniel said. He looked at the empty co-pilot seat. He thought of the look in Rose's eyes when the doctor said non-gestational. "I know," he repeated softly. "But she didn't have anyone else." "She has us now," Patch said. "God help us all." Outside, the stars stretched into long white lines. The jump drive engaged, and the rusty Minoc vanished into the dark, leaving only a fading echo of a signal behind. Ping. The mess hall of the rusty Minoc was not designed for a 7-foot-tall feline biped. It was designed for 3 humans who did not mind bumping elbows while eating dehydrated eggs. Daniel Rake sat at the small, kidney-shaped table, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt copper and regret. Across from him, Rose was attempting to interact with the ship's electric kettle. She held the appliance with the same delicate, terrified reverence one might hold a thermal detonator. "It is boiling," Rose said. Her voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the metal floor grating. "That is what kettles do," Daniel said, not looking up from his datapad. "It makes the water hot." "I know the theory," Rose said. She tapped the plastic switch with a claw that was essentially a curved obsidian dagger. "But the sound. It screams." "It is whistling," Patch's voice floated down from the ceiling speakers. "It is an archaic signal to indicate the phase transition of the liquid. Also, Daniel, I feel compelled to inform you that our guest is currently taking up 40% of the available floor space in the galley. If she inhales too deeply, we may lose atmospheric pressure." Rose's ears flattened against her skull. She pulled her hand back from the kettle, looking as though she had been scolded. She tried to make herself smaller, hunching her massive shoulders, but that only made her knock her knee against the table leg. The table jumped. Daniel's coffee sloshed over the rim. Daniel sighed. He set the cup down. "Patch mute," Daniel said. He looked at Rose. "Stop trying to shrink. You are big. The ship is small. We will adjust." Rose looked at him, her gold eyes wide and wary. "I am in the way. I can go to the cargo hold. I am used to storage conditions." "No," Daniel said. He stood up, grabbed a rag, and wiped the coffee spill. "Rule number 1 on this ship, no martyrs. We don't sleep in cargo holds unless the life support fails. You sleep in the guest bunk. You eat at the table." "And rule number 2, Rose asked. "No secrets," Daniel said. He looked her dead in the eye. "We are currently running from a government agency that wants to dissect you and imprison me. If you feel weird if that collar beeps, if you remember something, you tell me. Immediately." Rose touched the metal band around her throat. It was currently dormant, a dull matte black against her gray fur. "I am a secret," she said softly. "A fairly large one." "Patch already noticed," Daniel said. He poured the hot water into a second mug and slid it toward her. "Tea, it helps." Rose picked up the mug. In her hand, it looked like a thimble. She brought it to her nose, sniffing the steam. A look of profound, simple wonder crossed her face. It was the expression of someone who had been cold for a very long time and had forgotten what warmth felt like. "It smells like dry grass," she whispered. "Chamomile," Daniel said. "Drink it." The ship shuddered as the hyperdrive stabilizers adjusted. Rose didn't spill a drop. Her gyroscopic balance was perfect, a biological marvel that made Daniel's pilot instincts jealous. "We have a rendezvous in 2 hours," Daniel said, sitting back down. "We need an engineer. I can fly this brick and Patch can talk to it, but we need someone who can hit it with a wrench when it gets stubborn." "Jax Mercer," Patch supplied. Probability of him making a terrible first impression, 99%. The rendezvous point was a derelict comms buoy, drifting in the shadow of a gas giant. It was the kind of place people went when they did not want to be found. Jax Mercer's shuttle docked with a metallic clang that vibrated through the hull. Moments later, the airlock hissed open, and Jax strode in. He was a wiry man with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, and a smile that suggested he knew the punchline to a joke no one else had heard. "Danny boy," Jax shouted, dropping a heavy duffel bag on the deck. "You look like you slept in a centrifuge. And Patch tells me you pissed off the Meridian Authority. That is impressive. Usually you only piss off local magistrates and ex-wives." "Hello, Jax," Daniel said, leaning against the bulkhead. "Good to see you." "So," Jax rubbed his hands together. "Where is the cargo patch? Said it was sensitive biological material. Please tell me it is not livestock. I hate transporting pigs. They chew the wiring." Daniel stepped aside. "Not pigs." Rose stepped out from the shadows of the corridor. She had to turn sideways to fit through the door frame. She loomed over Jax, her shadow swallowing him whole. She looked down at him, her face impassive, her tail twitching slowly behind her. Jax froze. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Rose. He looked at the ceiling. "Okay," Jax said. "That is a lot of cat." Rose stiffened. "She is sorry." Daniel warned, his voice dropping an octave. Jax held up his hands. I know. Ancient warrior race, honor, glory, sharp bits. I just meant usually refugees fit in the spare bunk without needing a structural reinforcement survey." "Hey, big girl." Jax flashed a grin at Rose. "Don't scratch the furniture, yeah. That upholstery is vintage." It was a joke, a bad one delivered with the nervous velocity of a man trying to process fear, but a joke nonetheless. Rose did not laugh. Her ears swiveled back. She looked at Daniel, her expression crushed. "I will go to the engine room. I will not scratch." She turned and fled, her heavy footsteps retreating down the hall. Jax blinked. What did I say?" "She speaks human, Jax," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "But she doesn't speak asshole. She thinks you are serious." "I was joking," Jax protested. "I use humor to deflect anxiety. It is a coping mechanism." "Go fix the port thruster," Daniel ordered. "And keep your coping mechanisms to yourself until I explain things to her." Daniel found Rose in the engine room. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the warp drive housing, hugging her knees. The heat in the room was intense, but she seemed to crave it. "He didn't mean it," Daniel said, sitting down on a crate opposite her. "He sees a beast," Rose said, not looking up. "Everyone sees a beast, or a resource, or a target." "He sees a crewmate," Daniel corrected. "He is just an idiot. You have to translate Jax. When he says don't scratch the furniture, he means, I am terrified because you could rip my head off, so I am going to say something stupid to make myself feel brave." Rose looked at him. "That is a very inefficient language." "It is," Daniel agreed. "But it is the only one he has. Give him time." Rose looked at the warp drive, the blue light of the core reflected in her eyes. "My clan did not use humor. If you were too big, you were clumsy. If you were clumsy, you were a liability. If you were a liability, you were left behind." "Is that what happened?" Daniel asked gently. "They left you." Rose let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "They did not just leave me, Daniel. They erased me. A female who cannot bear young is not a female. She is a waste of rations. I was big Rose, too large for any mate empty inside. They told me I had no future, so they stopped recording my past." Daniel looked at the scars on his own hands, burn marks from a crash he shouldn't have walked away from. "I know about following rules," he said. "I was a pilot for the fleet. I believed in the chain of command. I believed that if you followed the procedure, the outcome would be just." He paused, the memory tasting like ash in his mouth. "I followed the procedure," Daniel continued. "I held my position when the order came. My wingman, his name was Chen, but we called him Rook. He screamed for backup for 3 minutes. I didn't move, because the order was hold. The procedure said holding was safer." Rose turned to face him fully. "He died." "He evaporated," Daniel said. "And I got a medal for discipline. I melted it down and sold it to buy this ship." The ship gave a sudden violent lurch. The proximity alarms began to scream. "Daniel," Patch's voice cut through the air, urgent and sharp. "We have company, Meridian interceptors. 2 of them. They are painting us with targeting locks." Daniel was up and moving before the sentence was finished. "Rose, strap in anywhere." He sprinted for the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat, just as a plasma bolt sizzled past the viewport. "Shields!" Daniel yelled. "Shields at 60%, Jax shouted over the comms from the rear engineering bay. "I am trying to reroute power from the toaster, but it is complicated." "Forget the toaster." Daniel slammed the throttle forward. On the radar, 2 red dots were closing in fast. They were sleek, military-grade interceptors. The rusty Minoc was a garbage truck by comparison. "We cannot outrun them in open space," Patch advised. "They have a top speed of 0.4 light. We have a top speed of maybe today." "I am not going to open space," Daniel said. His eyes narrowed. Ahead of them, a vast, glittering cloud of ice and debris stretched across the starfield. The frost lanes. It was a graveyard of comets and shattered moons, a chaotic swirl of frozen water and rock moving at thousands of miles per hour. "Daniel," Patch said, "survival probability in the frost lanes is 19%. "Never tell me the odds," Daniel muttered, knowing it was a cliché but feeling entitled to it. "Hang on." He banked the ship hard to the left. The artificial gravity compensators whined, struggling to keep up. The ship dove into the ice cloud. Immediately the world turned into a chaotic blur of white and gray. Chunks of ice the size of houses whipped past the viewport. The hull rang like a bell as smaller shards pelted the shields. "He is insane!" Rose's voice came over the comms. She had strapped herself into the navigator's chair behind him. "You are flying into an avalanche." "It is the only place their sensors can't track us," Daniel said. His face was a mask of cold concentration. This was where he lived. Not in the medbay, not in the mess hall, but here on the edge of disaster. His hands moved over the yoke with fluid, minimal motions. A twitch of the wrist to dodge a spinning glacier. A tap of the thruster to slide between 2 colliding asteroids. Rose watched him. She had seen him as a tired father, a weary hauler. Now she saw the predator. He was cold, precise, and utterly lethal in his competence. He was protecting them. "Bandit 1 has peeled off," Patch reported. "Too dense for their targeting computers. Bandit 2 is stubborn. He is following." "Let's see how stubborn," Daniel growled. He spotted it ahead, a massive hollowed-out tunnel in a moon-sized chunk of ice. It was a suicide run. The tunnel was barely wider than the ship. "Jax, give me 100% to the rear deflectors," Daniel ordered. "You are going to scrape the paint!" Jax screamed. Daniel punched it. The ship shot into the ice tunnel. The walls blurred. The sound was deafening, a constant roar of friction and impact. Suddenly, a massive shard of ice dislodged by their entry fell from the ceiling of the tunnel. It was right in their path, too close to dodge. "Brace!" Daniel yelled. Rose didn't brace. She unbuckled. "Rose, no!" Daniel shouted, but he couldn't turn around. Rose lunged forward. She didn't grab the controls. She grabbed the manual emergency brake lever, a heavy iron bar designed for hydraulic failure, and the secondary stabilizer wheel. "Patch transfer auxiliary power to the structural integrity field," Rose roared. It wasn't a request. It was a command that carried the authority of a general. "Complying," Patch said, surprised. Rose slammed the stabilizer wheel hard to the right, far faster than the hydraulic assist could have done it. At the same time, she physically braced her shoulder against the cockpit ceiling, her claws digging into the metal, her body becoming a living strut to absorb the shock. The ship clipped the ice. Crunch. The entire frame groaned. Sparks showered down. But they didn't shatter. The ship spun the hull screaming and slid out the other side of the tunnel into open space. The pursuer didn't make it. Behind them, a blossoming flower of orange fire illuminated the ice tunnel as the interceptor slammed into the obstruction. Silence returned to the cockpit. Daniel breathed. His hands were shaking slightly. He turned around. Rose was slumped against the bulkhead. She was rubbing her shoulder. There was a dent in the metal ceiling where she had braced herself. "You unbuckled," Daniel said. You could have died. We would have spun out, Rose said, breathing hard. The stabilizer servo is slow. I could hear it lagging. I assisted. Daniel looked at the dent. He looked at her. You are stronger than the hydraulics. I am efficient, Rose said, a small, tired smile touching her lips. And I do not like crashing, Daniel laughed. It was a hysterical, adrenaline-fueled sound. Okay, good save. Jax stuck his head into the cockpit. He looked green. I am alive. Okay, I need a drink. And clean pants. Rose, you are undeniably effective. Rose's ears perked up. Thank you, Jax. Patch, Daniel said, his voice sobering. Status on the beacon. That is the bad news, Patch said. The adrenaline spike you just experienced. The beacon liked it. The signal is sinking faster. The lock window has dropped from 48 hours to 12. Daniel swore. He pulled up the comms channel. Get me Dr. Wren, secure line. Dr. Cora Wren's face appeared on the small screen. She looked exhausted. She was in a dark room, likely hiding from her own colleagues. Daniel, she whispered. I saw the report. You are insane. Vale has declared you a bioterrorist. We know, Daniel said. Doctor, we can't cut this thing off. Patch says it's digging in. Do not cut it, Wren warned. I have been analyzing the data from the scan. It is not just a machine. It is a gestation matrix. English, Doctor, Daniel said. It is trying to build something, Wren said. It is using Rose's biological energy to construct a neural framework. If you cut it off, the feedback will scramble her brain. It is like trying to unplug a fetus from a mother. You will kill them both. Rose went still. There is no fetus. I am empty. You said so yourself. The beacon doesn't care about biology, Wren said. It cares about potential. It is searching for a resonance, an anchor. How do we stop it? Daniel asked. You can't stop it, Wren said. You have to finish it, or let it finish. There is a location in the database I recovered, the Frost Archive. It is an ancient Risari site buried deep in the cryosector. The signal is trying to go there. The Frost Archive, Rose frowned. That is a myth, a nursery tale about where the first clan came from. It is real, Wren said, and it is your only chance. If that beacon locks before you get there, Rose won't be Rose anymore. She will just be a vessel. Coordinates, Daniel asked. Wren sent the data. Go. And Daniel Vale knows about the archive too. He is just afraid to go there. He thinks it is cursed. Great, Daniel said. Cursed ancient ruins. My favorite. Later, the ship was quiet. They were drifting through a nebular cloud to mask their heat signature. Daniel was in the cockpit, staring at the picture of Milo taped to the console. It was a school photo. Milo was grinning, missing a front tooth. A soft chime indicated a message. It is a delayed packet, Patch said. From Milo. He sent it before the lockdown. Daniel hesitated. Then he pressed play. Hey, Dad! Milo's voice filled the small space. It was small and sleepy. I packed my bag, just in case you come early, and I drew a picture of us. And, I hope the job is going okay. Patch said you are stressed. Don't be stressed. I love you to the moon and back. Silence. Daniel put his head in his hands. The guilt was a physical weight pressing down on his chest. He was dragging his son into a war zone. He heard a shift of fabric behind him. Rose was standing there. She had heard it. She stood in the doorway for a long time, the ambient light of the nebula casting long shadows across her face. I am a danger, she said. It wasn't a question. We are all dangers, Daniel said without turning. If I stay, Rose said, her voice trembling slightly. Do I break your family? The boy needs his father. He does not need a refugee giant cat with a bomb on her neck. Daniel swiveled the chair around. He looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the fear, the shame, the desperate desire to be good, to be worthy of the space she took up. "Rose," Daniel said. His voice was firm but quiet. "Family is not a vase. You don't break it just by bumping into it. It is like this ship. It is ugly, it is welded together from scrap, and sometimes it smells like burnt ozone. But it holds." He stood up and walked over to her. He had to crane his neck to look her in the eye. "You saved us in the ice tunnel," Daniel said. "You are not cargo. You are crew. And on this ship, crew is family. So stop asking to leave." Rose looked at him. Her lower lip trembled. She blinked rapidly, her third eyelid flickering across her gold iris. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." "Alert," Patch interrupted, destroying the moment with characteristic efficiency. "Commissioner Vale has just broadcast a system-wide ultimatum. He has designated the Rusty Minoc as a Class A biohazard. He is offering a bounty, 50,000 credits, alive or otherwise." "He really wants his toy back," Jax yelled from the hallway. 50,000, I am tempted to turn myself in." "We are popular," Daniel said grimly. Patch set course for the Frost Archive. Maximum burn. "Daniel?" Rose gasped. She grabbed the doorframe. Her hand went to her neck. The collar was blazing now. A brilliant, blinding white light. "Rose!" Daniel reached for her. She doubled over, dropping to her knees. A sound tore from her throat, not a scream, but a guttural animal growl of pure agony. "It hurts," she gasped. "It feels like I am being unmade." "Patch, what is happening?" Daniel shouted, kneeling beside her. "The beacon," Patch said, his voice, dropping the dry humor entirely. "It has entered the synchronization phase. It is not just reading her DNA anymore. It is rewriting it." On the collar's display, the scrolling alien text froze. It blinked once, then displayed a single word in the common trade language, translated for the benefit of the observers. "Syncing." Rose looked up at Daniel. Her eyes were dilating the gold consumed by black. "It is looking for something," she whispered, clutching Daniel's hand so hard he felt his knuckles pop. "It is looking for the other half." "What other half?" Daniel asked. "I don't know," Rose cried out as another wave of pain hit her. "But it is cold. It is so cold." Daniel held her. He looked out at the stars toward the frozen coordinates of the archive. "Hold on, Rose," he said, fierce and low. "We are going to find out. We are going to the ice." The ship's engines flared, turning the void blue as they raced toward the dark. The descent onto the surface of the ice planet, designated on the star charts as Krios 4, was not a landing. It was a controlled fall into a graveyard of frozen wind. The atmosphere was thin, tearing at the hull of the Rusty Minoc, with a shriek that vibrated through the dental fillings of everyone on board. Through the reinforced viewport, Daniel Rake watched the ground rush up to meet them. It did not look like snow. It looked like shattered glass. The entire surface of the planet was a jagged, translucent expanse of tectonic ice plates, layered over one another, like the scales of a sleeping leviathan. Above the sky was a bruised purple, crisscrossed with white streaks of atmospheric lightning that looked less like weather and more like the cracks in a broken monitor. "Atmospheric density is 40% of standard," Patch announced. The artificial intelligence sounded strained, his synthesized voice battling the interference from the magnetic storms outside. "Temperature is -80 degrees. I would advise against a picnic." "Set her down in the Rift Valley," Daniel ordered, his hands wrestling the yoke. The ship bucked violently as a gust of wind slammed into the port thruster. "There, that shadow between the two spires." "That is not a shadow," Rose said. She was standing behind the pilot's chair, her claws gripping the headrest so hard the leather was beginning to tear. Her eyes were fixed on the dark fissure in the ice. "It is a mouth!" The ship slammed down. The landing struts groaned, compressing fully before bouncing back. The sound of the engine turbine whined down, replaced immediately by the howling of the wind outside. It was beautiful in the way a weapon is beautiful. It was pristine, deadly, and utterly indifferent to their presence. "Everyone suits up," Daniel said, unbuckling his harness. "Thermal layers maxed out. If your suit breaches, you have about 30 seconds before your blood turns to slush." Jax Mercer emerged from the engineering bay, looking pale. He was pulling on a heavy environment suit that looked like it had been patched together from 3 different surplus kits. "I hate ice," Jax muttered. "I really hate ice. Why couldn't the ancient alien secret be on a tropical beach planet? Why is it always ice or lava?" "Because history likes to be preserved, Jax," Daniel said. He grabbed his helmet. "And ice is the best preservative in the galaxy." They met at the airlock. Rose was already suited up. Her Risari physiology was robust, but even she could not survive Cryos 4 without protection. Her suit was custom modified, the helmet elongated to accommodate her muzzle and ears. Through the visor, her gold eyes glowed with a mixture of fear and a strange magnetic pull. The collar around her neck was pulsing. It was no longer the frantic strobe of the panic attack on the ship. It was a slow, deep rhythmic throb, synchronized with the lights on the datapad Daniel held. "Ready?" Daniel asked. Rose nodded. "It is calling me Daniel. It is singing." "Let us go see what the song is about," Daniel said. He hit the cycle button. The airlock hissed. The ramp lowered. The cold hit them instantly. It was not just a temperature. It was a physical weight. The wind smelled of ozone and something metallic like the taste of a battery on the tongue. They walked down the ramp, their magnetic boots clamping onto the slick ice. Ahead of them, the fissure Rose had seen from the air loomed. It was a massive triangular opening in the glacier, perfectly geometric. It was clearly artificial, but the ice had grown over it, softening the edges until it looked like a natural wound in the world. As they approached, Patch spoke in their earpieces. "Detecting massive energy signature," the AI said. "But Daniel, I am experiencing syntax errors." "What kind of errors?" Daniel asked, checking his scanner. The readings were going haywire. "It is not binary," Patch said. His voice fluctuated, dropping in pitch, then spiking. It sounded like 2 voices speaking at once. "The signal. It is asking a question. Where is the child?" Daniel stopped. "Patch, repeat." "I did not say that," Patch said, his voice returning to its normal dry tone. "I said I am detecting a localized dampening field. My sensors are blind beyond the threshold." Daniel looked at Jax. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Jax shouted over the wind. "I only hear my teeth chattering." Daniel looked at Rose. She was staring at the entrance. "I heard it," she whispered. "It was not the AI. It was the gate." They reached the entrance. The opening was flanked by 2 massive pillars of dark, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb the light. Carved into the stone were symbols, swirling organic shapes that looked less like writing and more like diagrams of cellular division. Rose reached out a gloved hand to touch one of the symbols. She froze. "I know this mark," she said. Her voice was trembling. "In the clan, this is the mark of the void. It is the sign for a quarantine zone. We were told it meant death." "And now?" Daniel asked. "Now," Rose said, tracing the line of the carving. "I see the rest of it. The wind has worn away the paint, but the carving remains. It is not the void. It is preservation." She turned to Daniel, anger flashing in her eyes. "They lied. For generations they lied. They told us this place was a grave. But it is a library." "History is written by the people who want to stay in power," Daniel said grimly. "Let's go inside." They stepped through the archway. The wind died instantly. Inside, the air was still and surprisingly thick. The smell of ozone was overpowering here. The tunnel sloped downward, spiraling deep into the crust of the planet. But the walls were not ice. They were alive. The corridor was lined with a translucent, amber-colored material that pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent glow. Veins of light ran through it, pumping a viscous fluid, that looked like liquid gold. Dr. Wren, Daniel activated his long-range comms. Are you seeing this feed? I am seeing it, Dr. Cora Wren's voice came through crackly but audible. She was still on the ship monitoring the transmission. Daniel, that is not stone. That is biomatter. It is dormant in a state of cryostasis, but it is organic. We are walking inside a giant organism, Jax asked, his voice rising in panic. Please tell me we are not in the colon. It is architecture, Dr. Wren corrected. Resari biotechnology. I have read theories about this. The ancients did not build machines. They grew them. They reached the bottom of the spiral. The corridor opened up into a vast spherical chamber. It was the size of a city stadium. In the center of the room stood a single, massive pedestal, surrounded by hundreds of smaller pod-like alcoves recessed into the walls. The echo chambers. This is it, Rose said. She walked toward the center pedestal. The collar on her neck was blazing now, casting long dancing shadows against the amber walls. As she stepped onto the central platform, the entire room woke up. The walls shifted color, turning from amber to a deep, resonant blue. The veins of light flared, racing toward the center of the room. A low hum began to build, a sound that was felt in the chest more than heard with the ears. Energy spike, Patch yelled in Daniel's ear. The beacon is drawing power from the facility, or the facility is feeding the beacon. It is a handshake protocol. Daniel walked up the platform, staying close to Rose. He scanned the pedestal. It was a control interface, but there were no buttons. Just a smooth depression in the shape of a hand with claws. And next to it, a smaller interface, a standard data port. Patch, can you interface? Daniel asked. I can try, the AI said. But do not blame me if I start speaking in riddles. Daniel pulled a cable from his suit and plugged it into the port. Accessing, Patch said. Translation matrix online. This is Daniel. This is dense. It is not just data. It is genetic memory. Summarize it, Daniel ordered. What is this place? It is a cradle, Dr. Wren's voice cut in. She sounded breathless. Daniel, look at the pods on the walls. The alcoves. Daniel looked up. The pods were lighting up. Inside each one, suspended in the amber fluid, were shapes. They were small. Feline. Embryos, Daniel asked. No, Dr. Wren said. Blueprints. They are not alive. They are templates. The cradle is not just a library. It is a repopulation engine. It was designed to ensure the survival of the species in case of a catastrophic event. Rose stared at the pods. Tears were streaming down her face inside her helmet. We were dying, she whispered. The wars, the sickness. The ancients built this to save us, to give us a way to start again. But it needs a trigger, Dr. Wren said. The data implies the system is inert. It needs two components to activate, an anchor and a refugee. I am the refugee, Rose said. She stepped closer to the handprint on the console. I am the one with no place, the one they threw away. And the anchor, Daniel asked. The data is corrupted here, Patch said. But wait. The term used for anchor translates roughly to the constant, or the guardian. It implies a biological structure that is compatible with the resonance frequency of the beacon. Daniel leaned against the console. His hand brushed against the warm, living material of the pedestal. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain shot up his right arm. Daniel gasped, jerking his hand back. He grabbed his wrist. Beneath the fabric of his flight suit, the old shrapnel scar on his forearm, the one from the war, the one that never quite stopped aching when it rained, was burning. It wasn't heat. It was vibration. Daniel, Jax asked. You okay? Fine. Daniel lied, his teeth grit. Static shock, but it wasn't static. He looked at the console. Where he had touched it, the amber light was pulsing in a different rhythm, a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. Why he thought, I am human. This is Risari Tech. Why does it know me? He pushed the thought away. Now was not the time. Rose, Daniel said. The beacon is sinking. Look at the countdown. On the holographic display projected by Rose's collar, the alien symbols were spinning faster. The text that Patch had translated as Sing Sing was flashing. I have to finish it, Rose said. She looked at the handprint. If I do not, the energy will build up and this whole place will detonate. And I am tired of running, Daniel. I am tired of being a mistake. She placed her hand into the depression. Boom. A shockwave of light exploded from the pedestal. It didn't knock them back. It passed through them. Rose screamed. Her back arched. The collar lifted her, suspending her on the tips of her toes. The blue light from the room poured into her, flowing into the collar, into her skin, into her very marrow. Rose! Daniel lunged forward. Do not touch her, Dr. Wren shouted. The energy field is too high. It will stop your heart. Daniel didn't listen. He saw the agony on Rose's face. He saw the way her eyes were rolling back, the way her body was trembling, as if it were being torn apart, atom by atom. He stepped into the light. The pain hit him like a physical wall. It felt like sticking his hand into a fusion reactor. His nerves screamed. His vision whitened. But he reached out. He grabbed Rose's free hand. I have got you! Daniel roared over the sound of the energy storm. I am here! The moment their skin touched, even through the gloves, the storm changed. The chaotic, violent swirling of the light stabilized. It smoothed out into a steady, powerful flow. Rose gasped, coming back to herself. She looked down at Daniel. He was grimacing, his teeth bared, holding on to her, as if she were the only solid thing in the universe. You are hurting, Rose cried. Let go. No, Daniel shouted. You are not doing this alone, that is the deal. No martyrs. The beacon pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then a chime rang out, clear, pure. The light faded to a gentle humming glow. Rose slumped. Daniel caught her, lowering her to the platform. They were both breathing hard, their breath fogging their visors. Jax poked his head out from behind a pillar where he had been hiding. Is everyone dead? Jax asked. If you are dead, please tell me so I can start looting. Rose let out a sound. It was a huff of air, then a chuckle, then a weak laugh. We are not dead, Jax, she said. She looked at Daniel. You are very stubborn. It is a job requirement, Daniel said, checking his suit readouts. His heart rate was 180. Are you okay? Did it rewrite you? Rose sat up. She touched her stomach. I feel different. Heavy, but not broken. The pain is gone. It feels quiet. Patch, Daniel said. Status. The beacon has advanced, Patch said. It is no longer broadcasting a location signal. It is broadcasting a final phase prep signal. The countdown has reset. We have 6 hours until whatever happens, happens. And, Patch added, his voice dropping, we have guests. Daniel looked at the tactical display on his wrist. Vale. Commissioner Vale, Patch confirmed. He has landed. His shuttle is at the entrance. He is hailing us. Put him on, Daniel said. He stood up, helping Rose to her feet. Vale's voice filled the chamber. It was amplified, echoing off the living walls. Mr. Rake, Vale said. I see you found the archive. Impressive navigation. I admit I did not think you would survive the frost lanes. We are full of surprises, Daniel said. What do you want, Vale? You want to bomb us? You will destroy the very thing you are trying to save. I have no intention of bombing the archive, Vale said. This facility is a heritage site of galactic importance. And frankly, Mr. Rake, I am not a murderer. I am a containment officer. My job is to prevent the spread of uncontrolled biological modification. She is not a virus, Daniel said, stepping in front of Rose. She is a factory, Vale replied. And you have just turned the key. Look at the readings, Daniel. That beacon is not just rewriting her DNA. It is drawing mass from the archive. It is creating matter. If that process completes without medical supervision, the trauma will kill her, and the resulting energy discharge will crack this planet in half. He is lying, Jax whispered. He is exaggerating, Dr. Wren said over the comms. But he is partially right. The energy levels are critical. Rose needs a stabilizer. She needs a medical bay, not a cave. Surrender, Daniel, Vale said. Walk out. I give you my word Rose will be treated with the utmost care. We will extract the beacon, save her life, and you can go back to your son. Daniel looked at Rose. She was leaning against the console, looking exhausted. He is right, Rose said softly. I can feel it building again. It is too much. Daniel looked around the room. There was no back exit. We are not surrendering, Daniel said to the air. But we are coming out. If you point a single weapon at her, I will blow the entrance tunnel and seal us all inside forever. No weapons, Vale said. Just medical teams. You have my word. Daniel cut the channel. We are going out, Jax asked, eyes wide. That is the plan walking into the lion's den. We are going to change the narrative, Daniel said. Patch, is the external camera feed still recording? Affirmative. Good. Broadcast it. Open frequency. Wideband. They walked back up the spiral tunnel. The walk felt longer this time. When they emerged into the howling wind of the surface, the scene had changed. A sleek, black Meridian Authority shuttle was parked on the ice. A perimeter had been set up. Floodlights cut through the gloom, pinning Daniel and Rose in cones of blinding white light. Standing in front of the shuttle was Commissioner Soren Vale. He wore a thick woolen coat over his uniform, looking like a disappointed schoolmaster. But off to the side, lurking behind a ridge of ice, Daniel saw a glint of a lens. Mara Keene, the freelance journalist they had briefly encountered at the station. She had followed the signal. She was watching. Daniel took a breath. He took his helmet off. Daniel, Jax hissed. It is -80. I need them to see my face, Daniel said. I need them to see a father, not a pilot in a mask. He threw the helmet onto the snow. The cold hit him like a hammer. His skin tightened, his eyelashes instantly frosting over. But he stood tall. He put his arm around Rose's shoulders, not dragging her, not pushing her, but supporting her. She is under my protection, Daniel shouted over the wind. His voice was raw. This is not a containment operation. This is a rescue, and if you touch her, you answer to me. Vale looked at him. He saw the camera lens on the ridge. He saw the defiance in Daniel's frozen face. He saw the way the giant, terrifying alien leaned into the small human for comfort. Vale raised a hand. His troops lowered their rifles. Get them a blanket, Vale ordered, and get a stretcher for the Risari. We are doing this by the book. Rose looked at Daniel. Her eyes were full of tears that froze on her fur. Why? She asked. I am just a potential catastrophe. I do not care about the potential, Daniel said, his teeth chattering violently. I care about the person. He looked at her, his vision blurring from the cold. I do not choose you because you are useful, Rose, he said. I choose you because you are you. Rose let out a sob. It was the sound of a wall breaking down, not the ice wall of the archive, but the wall she had built around her own heart. Final phase. Prep complete, the beacon announced. The voice came from the caller, loud and clear in the frozen air. The sky above them changed. The purple clouds tore open. A beam of pure white light shot up from the archive entrance, piercing the atmosphere and connecting with the aurora borealis above. The sky turned a brilliant, blinding green. It is starting, Dr. Wren's voice came from Daniel's earpiece. Daniel, get her to the medical unit. Now. The final lock-in is happening. Vale stepped forward. Mr. Rake, please, let us help her. Daniel looked at Vale. Then he looked at Rose. We go together, Daniel said. Agreed, Vale said. As they loaded Rose onto the hover stretcher, Mara Keene stepped out from behind the ice ridge. She held up her camera. The recording light was a steady red eye in the storm. "I got it all," she mouthed to Daniel. Daniel nodded. He climbed into the back of the authority shuttle, holding Rose's hand as the doors hissed shut, sealing out the cold, but locking them in with the enemy. The engine roared. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked. "To the nearest secure facility," Vale said, sitting opposite them. "An old outpost. It has a biodome. We need atmosphere if she is going to survive the transition." Rose squeezed Daniel's hand. "Daniel," she whispered, "I am scared." "I know," Daniel said. He kissed her knuckles, ignoring the shocked look on Vale's face. "I am too. But we are a family now, and families do not leave anyone behind." The shuttle lifted off banking, away from the glowing spire of the archive, heading toward the final confrontation with biology and destiny. The interrogation room aboard the Meridian Authority flagship, the halo of prudence, was not designed for comfort. It was designed to make the occupant feel small, transparent, and inevitable. The walls were a matte sound-absorbing gray that seemed to swallow the light. There were no windows, only a single holographic strip running along the ceiling that simulated the cold, sterile light of a sun that provided no warmth. Daniel Rake sat on one side of a triangular metal table. His hands were cuffed to the table surface, not with metal, but with a magnetic field that hummed just below the range of human hearing. Across from him sat Commissioner Soren Vale. Vale looked less like a jailer and more like a tired accountant who had just discovered a discrepancy that would cost millions of lives. To Daniel's right, separated by a containment field of shimmering energy, sat Rose. She looked massive in the small space, yet paradoxically fragile. The Risari warrior, who could hold up a collapsing ice tunnel with her shoulders, was now slumped in a chair that was too small for her. The collar around her neck was pulsing. It was a slow, deep rhythm, like the heartbeat of a sleeping leviathan. Every time it pulsed, the lights in the room dimmed by 10%. Thump. The silence in the room was heavy. "Let us review the numbers," Commissioner Vale said. He tapped the table, bringing up a holographic display of a star system Daniel did not recognize. "This is the Alvari sector. 30 years ago, a biological anomaly was detected on a mining colony. The local governor, a man of significant empathy, decided to bypass protocol. He wanted to save the host." Vale swiped his hand. The hologram turned red. 72 hours later, Vale continued, his voice devoid of theatricality, which made it all the more terrifying. The biological matter had expanded to cover the entire southern continent. It consumed the atmosphere. 7 million people asphyxiated. 7 million, Mr. Rake. That is a number. It is not a story. It is a statistic written in blood. Daniel looked at the hologram. "Rose is not a planet-eater, Vale. She is a refugee." "She is a carrier," Vale corrected gently. "And the cradle beacon on her neck is not a necklace. It is a terraforming engine. Or a weapon. We do not know. And because we do not know, we cannot take the risk." Vale slid a datapad across the table toward Rose. It stopped against the containment field. "The form is simple," Vale said to Rose. "It is a voluntary confinement agreement. You agree to be placed in cryostasis until we can surgically remove the device. It is humane. You will sleep. You will not feel pain." Rose looked at the datapad. Her gold eyes were dull clouded by the immense strain of the synchronization process. "And if I do not wake up?" Rose asked. Her voice was raspy. "Then you die in your sleep," Vale said honestly. "Which is a better death than tearing yourself apart from the inside out." Rose stared at the document. Daniel could see the muscles in her jaw working. She was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of holding herself together. "I was expelled from my clan," Rose said slowly, "because a scanner said I was empty. Because a line of text on a medical report said I was not a woman, but a waste of space. She looked up at Vale. The gold fire in her eyes flared brighter than the containment field. I have spent my life being defined by paperwork, Commissioner. I was exiled for a line of text. I will not sign another one. She pushed the datapad away. It hit the energy field with a spark and skidded off the table. Thump. The beacon pulsed louder. The sound vibrated in Daniel's teeth. It was getting stronger. In the corner of the room, standing awkwardly by a wall panel, stood Dr. Cora Wren. She held a medical scanner, her face pale. Beside her, hovering near the ceiling vents, was a small drone Patch's mobile unit. Commissioner, Dr. Wren spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. With respect, your historical data is flawed. The Alvari incident was caused by a viral pathogen. This is not a virus. Look at the readings. She projected her scanner data into the center of the room, overriding Vale's hologram. It showed a complex weaving pattern of light, Rose's DNA intertwining with the beacon's energy. It is not consuming her, Dr. Wren said. It is building. It is a gestation cycle. The collar is forcing her body into a state of creation. If you put her in cryostasis now, the shock will cause a cascade failure. The energy has nowhere to go. She will detonate like a fusion bomb. And if we let it continue? Vale asked. I do not know, Dr. Wren admitted. But at least she has a chance. Hope is not a strategy, Vale said coldly. Containment is. The room seemed to shrink. The air grew heavy, charged with static electricity. The beacon let out a double pulse. Thump, thump. A guard by the door shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. He rubbed his temples. Is anyone else hearing that? The guard muttered. It feels like someone is scratching the inside of my skull. It is the resonance, Patch's synthesized voice cut through the tension. The signal is shifting from digital to biological. It is broadcasting on a frequency that affects the nervous system of carbon-based life forms. Basically, the beacon is asking everyone in the room to kindly be quiet. Vale looked up at the drone. Mute the AI. If you require silence, Patch continued, ignoring the order. I suggest you do not let the countdown clock run in a sealed room. It tends to make the monkeys nervous. Enough. Vale stood up. He walked over to Daniel. Mr. Rake, you are the variables I cannot calculate. You are the anchor. The beacon seems to respond to your presence. You calm it. You stabilize her. I am her family, Daniel said. That is what families do. Then do your duty as a father, Vale said, leaning down, his face inches from Daniel's. Think of your son. If this creature becomes ground zero for a biological event, there will be no world left for Milo to grow up in. Convince her. Make her sign the order. If she goes into cryo now, we might save the sector. If you refuse, I will have to authorize forcible extraction. Daniel looked at Vale. He saw the fear behind the commissioner's eyes. Vale wasn't a monster. He was a man holding a dam against a flood, terrified that one crack would drown the world. But he was wrong. You talk about the sector, Daniel said, quiet and low. You talk about 7 million people, but you are not looking at the one person in front of you. The needs of the many, Vale began, are paid for by the few, Daniel finished. I know the quote. I used to believe it. I believed it when I left my wingman behind in the Azure Nebula because the mission parameters said his ship was a loss. I believed it when I accepted the medal they gave me for coming back alone. Daniel leaned forward, straining against the magnetic cuffs. But the many never come to thank you, Vale. The many do not visit you in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. The only thing you have left is the face of the person you sacrificed. Thump. The beacon flared white. A crack appeared on the glass surface of the water pitcher on the table. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room hissed open. Mara Keene stood there. She was not supposed to be there. She was flanked by 2 confused junior officers who looked like they weren't sure whether to arrest her or ask for her autograph. Commissioner, Mara shouted, holding up her recording device. You might want to see this." "Remove her," Vale barked. "You can't remove the signal," Mara yelled. "We are live, Commissioner. The whole station is watching, and not just the station. I bounced the signal off the relay. The whole system is watching." Vale froze. "You did what I am a journalist," Mara said, stepping into the room. "And this hearing, it is now a public forum." She turned the device around. On the screen was a stream of comments, views, and reactions, scrolling so fast they were a blur. "People are seeing what is happening," Mara said. "They are seeing a veteran and a refugee being treated like criminals. And they are asking questions." Vale's face went pale. "You have compromised security operation." "I have ensured accountability," Mara shot back. Then the device chimed. A priority message notification overlay appeared on the screen. "It is for you, Daniel," Mara said softly. "From Milo." Daniel felt his heart stop. "Milo," Mara tapped the screen. A video message played. It was grainy, recorded in a hurry. Milo was sitting in a safe house, looking small and scared, but his chin was set in a stubborn line that was purely his father's. "Dad," Milo said. His voice cracked. "I saw the news. They say Rose is a monster. They say you are hiding her." Milo looked straight into the camera. "Don't hide, Dad. You told me we don't hide from the hard stuff. Rose isn't a monster. She is part of the crew. Bring her home." The video ended. Daniel stared at the blank screen. Something inside him broke, not a bone, but a chain. The fear of losing custody, the fear of judgment, the fear of the authority, it all evaporated. He looked at Vale. "Unlock these cuffs," Daniel said. "Mr. Rake." "Unlock them," Daniel roared. The sound was so loud, so filled with command presence, that the guard instinctively reached for the control panel. The magnetic field died. Daniel stood up. He rubbed his wrists. "We are leaving," Daniel said. "We are walking out of here. And you are going to let us." "I cannot do that," Vale said, his hand dropping to his sidearm. "The risk is too high." "The risk of what?" Daniel asked, stepping toward the camera Mara was holding. He looked directly into the lens. "The risk of compassion. Look at her." He pointed at Rose. She was hunched over, sweat matting her fur, fighting a battle inside her own body that no one else could see. "She is in pain," Daniel said to the galaxy. "She is scared, and she is surrounded by men with guns who want to freeze her because they are afraid of what she might become. We are supposed to be better than this. Civilization isn't about how big your walls are. It is about who you let inside them." He turned to Vale. "If you shoot us," Daniel said, "you do it in front of every voter, every taxpayer, and every mother in the quadrant. Do you want to be the man who executed a sick refugee on live streams? Or do you want to be the man who helped solve the mystery?" Vale looked at the camera. He looked at the scrolling comments. He looked at his own men who had lowered their weapons. The commissioner let out a long, slow breath. He took his hand off his weapon. "If she detonates," Vale said quietly, "it will be on your head, Daniel." "I will carry it," Daniel said. "The beacon is entering the final lock phase," Dr. Wren warned, looking at her scanner. "We have less than 1 hour. We need a controlled environment. Somewhere with atmosphere but isolated." "The outpost," Daniel said. "Sector 9. There is an abandoned terraforming dome. It has atmosphere but no population. We can go there." "I will provide a transport," Vale said. "But I am sending a perimeter force. If the readings spike above critical, we will incinerate the dome. That is the compromise." "Deal," Daniel said. He walked over to the containment field. He placed his hand on the glass. "Rose." She looked up. Her eyes were almost entirely black now, the pupils dilated to swallow the gold. "Can you walk?" "I can crawl if I have to," she whispered. Vale deactivated the field. Daniel helped Rose stand. She was heavy, her weight leaning entirely on him. She smelled of ozone and fever. They walked out of the interrogation room. The corridor was lined with authority soldiers, but no one moved. They parted like water. Mara Keene followed them, her camera rolling, documenting every step of the long walk to the hangar. The transport shuttle was silent. Dr. Wren was busy administering stabilizers to Rose, trying to buy them time. Patch was plugged into the navigation console, flying the ship with a precision that bordered on aggressive. Daniel sat next to Rose, holding her hand. Her skin was burning hot. "Daniel," Rose said. Her voice was barely a whisper. She did not open her eyes. "I am here," Daniel said. "I am afraid," she said. "I know. It is okay to be scared." "No," Rose shifted, turning her head to rest on his shoulder. "I am not afraid of dying. I have been dead since they exiled me. I am afraid that when this is over, you will regret this." "Regret what?" Daniel asked. "Regret saving me," Rose said. "You have lost your anonymity. You have made an enemy of the authority. You have put your son in danger. For a stray cat." Daniel laughed softly. It was a tired, ragged sound. "Rose, look at me." She opened her eyes. The blackness was swirling now, like ink in water. "I regret a lot of things," Daniel said. "I regret not being there when Milo took his first steps because I was flying a cargo run. I regret the fight I had with my wingman before he died. I regret selling my grandfather's watch to pay for fuel." He squeezed her hand. "But us being here." He shook his head. "I don't regret a single second of it. You are not a stray Rose. You are the destination." Rose looked at him. A tear leaked from the corner of her eye, tracking through the fur of her cheek. "You are a foolish human," she whispered. "And you are a giant trouble magnet," Daniel replied. "We match." "Warning," Patch announced. "Approaching the outpost. Atmospheric entry in 10 seconds. And Daniel, you should look out the window." Daniel looked. Below them, the desolate moon where the outpost sat was dark. But the sky above it was not. The aurora was back. But it wasn't the natural green of solar wind. It was blue. A deep, crystalline blue that rippled across the stars like a curtain being drawn. The beacon on Rose's neck let out a sound that wasn't a ping. It was a chord. A 3-note harmony that resonated with the lights in the sky. "Lock in final phase," the text on the collar scrolled. "It is time," Dr. Wren said, her voice tight. "Get her to the dome, now." The shuttle touched down on the snow-swept landing pad of the abandoned outpost. The structure was a skeletal ruin of a failed colony, but in the center, the biodome stood intact, a bubble of life against the vacuum. Daniel lifted Rose. She was too weak to walk now. He carried her in his arms, her head resting against his chest. She felt heavier than she should, as if she were carrying the weight of a star. They ran through the airlock into the green, overgrown silence of the biodome. Outside, the blue aurora intensified, swirling into a funnel cloud of light directly above the dome. The countdown on the collar hit 0, and then the numbers disappeared, replaced by a single word in the ancient Risari script, "Begin." The world turned white. The biodome of Outpost 9 was a bubble of defiant green against a universe of white. Outside, the wind screamed across the ice fields of the planet, a sound like 1,000 knives sharpening themselves against the hull. But inside, under the reinforced polymer curvature of the dome, the air was still humid and smelled faintly of moss and old hydroponic nutrients. It had been 30 hours since they landed. 30 hours of turning a derelict research station into a nursery. Daniel Rake stood by the airlock watching his son. Milo had arrived 4 hours ago, smuggled in on a humanitarian transport arranged by Mara Keene. The boy looked small in his oversized thermal parka, his nose red from the brief exposure to the cold during the transfer. He was standing in the center of the main atrium, staring up. He was not staring at the exotic plants that had overgrown the station walls. He was staring at Rose. Rose was attempting to hang a sheet over a row of bright grow lights to dim the room. She was standing on a crate, her arms reached high, the massive muscles of her back shifting under her tunic. She looked powerful, ancient, and terrifying. Milo took a step forward. A twig snapped under his boot. Rose froze. Her ears swiveled one toward the sound, one staying locked on the sheet. She turned her head slowly, her gold eyes widening when they landed on the boy. She looked like a tiger caught in a sudden spotlight, terrified not of the hunter, but of the china shop she was standing in. "Hello," Milo said. His voice was a small chirp in the large, echoing space. Rose lowered her arm slowly. The sheet fluttered down, covering her head for a second before she pulled it away with a clumsy, frantic motion. "Hello," Rose rumbled. She tried to make her voice soft, but it came out as a growl that vibrated in the floorboards. She winced, clearing her throat. "I mean hello. You are smaller than the pictures." "You are bigger," Milo said. He walked closer, fearless in the way only 7-year-old boys can be. He stopped right in front of her. "My dad said you are a cat. But you don't look like a cat. You look like a tank with fur." Daniel, watching from the shadows, felt his heart stop. He stepped forward to intervene, to pull Milo back, but Rose held up a hand with claws that could slice through durasteel. She knelt. It was a slow, tectonic movement. She brought her face down until it was level with Milo's. "A tank," Rose repeated, testing the word. A small, dry smile touched her lips. "I have been called worse. I have been called a weapon. I have been called a defect. Tank is acceptable." Milo reached out. Before Daniel could shout, the boy's hand was buried in the thick gray fur of Rose's forearm. Rose stopped breathing. She held perfectly still, her eyes locked on Daniel over the boy's head. Her gaze was frantic. "Am I hurting him? Is he scared?" "Soft," Milo decided. He patted her arm, then looked at the glowing collar around her neck. "Does that hurt?" "Sometimes," Rose whispered. "Right now it is quiet." "Dad says you are sick," Milo said. "Like when I had the chicken pox. But space chicken pox." "Something like that," Rose said. "Okay," Milo nodded. He turned to Daniel. "Dad, she is cool. Can we keep her?" Daniel let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for a decade. He walked over and ruffled Milo's hair. "She is not a pet, Milo. She is family. And we don't keep family. We just stick together." Rose looked at them, the man and the boy. Her third eyelid flickered, wiping away a sudden sheen of moisture. She stood up abruptly, turning away to fiddle with the sheet again. "I must prepare the sleeping area," she said, her voice thick. "I am very bad at domestic tasks. I broke a pillow earlier. I did not know feathers could explode like that." "I will help," Milo said, running after her. "I am good at pillows." Daniel watched them go. For the first time since the medbay on Kelvari Station, the knot of tension in his chest loosened. This was insane. They were fugitives. They were hiding in a frozen wasteland. But standing there, watching a giant alien warrior take pillow-fluffing instructions from a second grader, Daniel realized he had stopped running. He was not retreating anymore. He was fortifying. The peace lasted for 6 hours. It broke not with a bang, but with a vibration. It started in the floor. A low hum like a generator, spinning up deep within the planet's core. Then the snow outside the dome began to dance. Millions of ice crystals lifted into the air, vibrating in a synchronized pattern, forming geometric shapes that mirrored the symbols on the archive walls. "Daniel," Patch's voice came over the facility speakers. "I would advise you to hold on to something. The planetary resonance index just jumped 3,000%. In the makeshift medical bay they had set up in the command center, Rose screamed. It was a sound that tore through the tranquility of the dome. Daniel was at her side in seconds. Rose was lying on the biobed, her back arched, her hands, gripping the metal rails so hard the steel was warping. The collar was no longer pulsing. It was a solid band of blinding white light. "It is time," Dr. Cora Wren said. She was monitoring a bank of portable scanners, her face bathed in the chaotic light of the readouts. "The lock-in is complete. The beacon is forcing the biological transition." She is in agony, Daniel yelled, grabbing Rose's shoulder. Her skin was burning hot, radiating a fever that felt like a localized sun. Give her a sedative. I can't, Dr. Wren shouted back. Her neural pathways are being rewritten. If I sedate her now, I could sever the connection between her brain and her autonomic nervous system. She would stop breathing. Rose gasped, her head thrashing from side to side. Daniel, get the boy out. Milo is with Jax in the greenhouse, Daniel said, wiping the sweat from her forehead. He is safe. Just breathe, Rose. Just breathe. It feels like fire, Rose choked out. Not inside. Everywhere. Like my bones are melting. Patch, Daniel barked. Analysis. The drone hovered over the bed, its single eye spinning. I am detecting massive cellular regeneration, Daniel. And construction. The energy from the beacon is not just stimulating her cells. It is arranging them. It is building a structure inside her abdominal cavity. It is rapid prototyping, but biological. A tumor, Daniel asked, terrified. No, Dr. Wren said, her eyes wide, as she looked at the holographic scan. Not a tumor. Look at the geometry. It is a lattice, a cradle. Outside, the sky had turned a violent electric violet. The aurora borealis was descending, funneling down toward the dome, like a tornado of light. Warning, Patch said, his voice dipping into a calm customer service tonality that meant things were very bad. Perimeter breach detected. Meridian Authority transports are landing. 3 of them. And Daniel, they brought the heavy walkers. Daniel looked at the view screen. Through the swirling snow, he saw the dark shapes of dropships descending. Massive mechanized walkers' containment units, equipped with flamethrowers and cryocannons, were thudding onto the ice. Vale, Daniel hissed. He promised a perimeter, Dr. Wren said. This looks like an assault. He is scared, Daniel said. He sees the sky turning purple and he thinks the planet is about to crack. Stay with her, Doctor. Patch, you are on medical monitor duty. If she flatlines you, shock her. I am a navigation AI, Patch protested. I am not insured for medical malpractice. Improvise! Daniel grabbed his rifle, a useless kinetic slug thrower against walkers, but it was all he had, and ran for the airlock. He stepped out into the storm. The cold was instant and brutal, but the air around the dome was crackling with static energy. Commissioner Soren Vale stood 20 yards away, flanked by 2 squads of armored troopers. Behind him, a walker loomed, its cannon pointed directly at the dome. Step aside, Mr. Rake, Vale's voice was amplified, booming over the wind. Look at the readings. The energy spike is off the charts. We have to neutralize the epicenter before it destabilizes the crust. She is in labor, Daniel screamed, walking forward, his weapon lowered, but his body acting as a shield. It is not a bomb. It is a birth. It is a biological event, Vale shouted. We cannot take the chance. We are preparing to vent the dome. Vacuum will neutralize the reaction. You will kill them, Daniel roared. My son is in there, Vale faltered. He looked at the dome. Through the transparent panels, he could see the silhouette of the greenhouse. He could see Jax Mercer holding a small boy. I have orders, Daniel, Vale said, his voice losing some of its steel. Protocol states that if the resonance exceeds Class 4. To hell with the protocol, Daniel threw his rifle down. It clattered on the ice. He walked toward the soldiers, his hands open. Look at me, Vale. You know me. You know I don't take risks with my crew. I am telling you this is controlled. It is happening exactly as the Archive predicted. The Archive predicted a repopulation engine, Vale said. Not this storm. Suddenly, the door to the dome hissed open behind Daniel. It wasn't Jax. It wasn't the doctor. It was Rose. She had dragged herself off the medical bed. She was leaning against the doorframe, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her face twisted in pain. But she was standing, and clinging to her leg, looking terrified but defiant, was Milo. Don't shoot, Milo screamed. His high-pitched voice cut through the howling wind. Don't shoot Rose. Rose looked down at the boy. She was trembling violently. The collar was blinding, but she reached down and covered Milo's head with her hand, shielding his eyes from the glare. Go back inside, little one, she gasped. It is cold. No, Milo said, hugging her leg tighter. Vale watched them. He saw the giant, terrifying creature, the biological threat, ignoring her own agony to protect a human child from the cold. He saw the way the boy clung to her, not as a hostage, but as a protector. The walker behind Vale whirred, its targeting sensors locking on. Target acquired, the machine's automated voice announced. Biosignature confirmed. Preparing to fire. Belay that order, Vale shouted. He spun around, facing his own machine. Stand down. I said stand down. Commissioner, the squad leader asked, confused. The readings are still rising. Vale looked back at Daniel, at Rose, at Milo. He took a deep breath. If we fire, Vale said quietly, we destroy the only thing worth saving in this sector. He turned to Daniel. Get them inside, Vale ordered, his voice rough. I will hold the perimeter. I will tell command our sensors are malfunctioning. But Daniel, whatever is happening, it needs to finish. Now, before the planet shakes us all off. Daniel nodded once. A silent acknowledgement of the grace given. He turned and scooped up Milo, grabbing Rose's arm with his free hand. Come on, he said. Let's go have a baby. Back in the medical bay, the situation had gone from critical to impossible. Rose was back on the bed. The pain was no longer coming in waves. It was a constant crushing pressure. I can't, Rose whispered. Tears were streaming down her muzzle. Daniel, I can't do it. It is too much. Make it stop, please. Daniel handed Milo to Jax. Take him to the greenhouse. Put headphones on him. Loud music. Jax nodded, looking pale, and hurried the boy away. Daniel took Rose's hand. He didn't just hold it. He anchored it. You can do this, Daniel said. You are the strongest thing I have ever met. You held up an ice tunnel. You fought off a kill team. This is just biology. It is not biology, Rose cried. It is destiny. And I hate it. I don't want to be a vessel, Daniel. I don't want to be the last hope of the Risari. I just want... She broke off, a sob racking her chest. I just want to be a person, she whispered. I don't want to be an experiment anymore. Daniel leaned in. He pressed his forehead against hers. You are not an experiment, he said fiercely. And you are not a project. You are Rose. You are the one who drinks chamomile tea because it smells like dry grass. You are the one who is afraid of electric kettles. You are the one my son thinks is cool. He looked deep into her eyes. You are my home, Rose. If you want to be. Not because of what you are carrying, but because of who you are. Rose stared at him. The panic in her eyes slowed, replaced by something steady, something warm. Your home, she asked. My home, Daniel promised. Now push. Doctor, Patch yelled. The lattice is completing. The beacon is drawing the final energy reserves from the anchor. From the anchor, Dr. Wren frowned. She looked at the scanner. Then, she looked at Daniel. Daniel was groaning. He had gone pale. His right arm, the one holding Rose's hand, was glowing. Not the suit. The arm itself. Beneath the skin. A geometric web of light was shining through his flesh, pulsing in perfect synchronization with Rose's collar. Daniel, Dr. Wren gasped. Your arm. The scar. It burns, Daniel gritted out. But it feels right. Keep going. Dr. Wren's fingers flew across the keyboard. Oh my God, she whispered. I see it now. The archive data wasn't missing. It was waiting for context. What are you talking about? Jax yelled from the doorway. The twist, Dr. Wren said, her voice trembling with scientific awe. Rose, she really doesn't have a womb. She never did. The clan was right about her biology, but they were wrong about the technology. She pointed at the screen. The cradle beacon isn't a fertility device. It is a matter synthesizer. It is designed to create a temporary gestation environment, a womb made of hard light and biological matter, inside a host who cannot carry young. But it requires a massive amount of stabilizing energy to form the lattice. She looked at Daniel. It needs a resonance lattice to ground the signal. And you have one, Daniel. I have a what? Daniel gasped, sweat dripping from his nose. Your military implant, Wren said. The anti-jamming mesh in your arm. The one they gave pilots during the Unification War to stop psychic attacks. It is the same tech. It is Resari-derived. The beacon recognized it. That is why it pinged you in the medbay. That is why it locked onto you. Rose looked at Daniel, her eyes wide. You are the anchor, she whispered. So, Daniel managed a weak laugh. I am the father, technically. Biologically, no, Wren said. Structurally, yes. You are literally the battery that is holding the womb together while the babies form. If you let go of her hand, the lattice collapses. I am not letting go, Daniel said. He squeezed harder. Patch, how many? Scanning, Patch said. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 heartbeats. And Daniel. They are not just Resari. What? The synthesis uses the genetic material available, Patch said. It is using the stored templates from the archive, and it is sampling the anchor to fill in the gaps. Daniel looked at Rose. She looked at him. Hybrids, Rose whispered. Push, Daniel said softly. Let's meet them. The next hour was a blur of noise light and the kind of profound, terrifying effort that exists only at the edge of life and death. There was no violence, no tragedy. Just the hard, sweaty, miraculous work of bringing life into a cold universe. And then silence. The wind outside stopped. The aurora vanished. The collar on Rose's neck went dark. It fell open with a metallic click, clattering onto the floor. Rose slumped back against the pillows, her chest heaving. In the specialized incubation pod Dr. Wren had prepared, 4 small shapes were wriggling. They were covered in soft, downy fur. 2 were gray like Rose. 1 was dark like the space between stars. And one had a patch of skin that looked remarkably human, with a tuft of hair that matched Daniel's. They were mewling, a soft, hungry sound. 4, Jax whispered, peeking over the edge of the pod. 4 kittens, or kids. Don't call them that, Daniel said, exhausted. He was sitting on the floor, leaning against the bed. His arm was throbbing, the scar seared fresh, but he didn't care. Rose reached out. Dr. Wren handed her the first one. Rose held the baby in her massive hand. It was so small. She looked at it with a wonder that erased decades of shame. I have children, she whispered. I am not empty. No, Daniel said, pulling himself up to sit beside her on the bed. You are definitely not empty. Milo crept into the room. He looked at the pod. Then he looked at Daniel. Then at Rose. 1, 2, 3, 4, Milo counted. He pointed to himself. 5. He pointed to Rose. 6. He pointed to Daniel. 7. Milo grinned. We need a bigger ship, Dad. A family of 7 won't fit in the Minoc. Daniel laughed. It was a happy sound. We will figure it out, Milo. The airlock cycled. Commissioner Vale walked in. He was covered in snow, his uniform singed from the static discharge. He looked at the room, the exhausted doctor, the hovering drone, the pilot, the alien, and the babies. He walked over to the pod. He looked down at the hybrids. This defies every regulation in the manual, Vale said softly. Cross-species synthesis. Unauthorized use of ancient technology. Transport of restricted biological assets. He looked at Daniel. However, Vale continued, pulling out his datapad. The regulations also state that endangered species are under the highest level of protection. And since these individuals are unique in the galaxy, they technically constitute a new species. He tapped the screen. I am classifying this outpost as a protected heritage site, and I am designating you Mr. Rake and you, Ms. Rose, as the legal guardians. The authority will maintain a perimeter, but we will not interfere. Rose looked at him. Why? Vale shrugged. He looked at Milo, who was now letting one of the kittens chew on his finger. Because the universe is cold enough, Vale said. We don't need to make it colder. Epilogue. 1 year later. The biodome was no longer a ruin. It was a home. The hydroponic gardens were thriving, producing tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes. The rusty Minoc sat on the landing pad repaired and upgraded with authority credits. Outside, under the white silence of the permanent ice, Daniel sat on a bench he had welded together from spare hull plating. He was watching the snow. The door opened. Rose stepped out. She wasn't wearing a jumpsuit anymore. She wore a simple tunic woven from the fibers of the dome plants. She looked healthy, strong, and happy. She sat down next to him. The cold didn't seem to bother her as much as it used to. The clan sent a message again, Rose said quietly. Oh, Daniel asked. What do they want this time? They want me to come back, Rose said. They heard about the children. They say I am a miracle now. They say I have been blessed by the ancients. They want to give me a high seat on the council. And, Daniel asked. He didn't look at her. He looked at his hands. Rose laughed. She bumped her shoulder against his. It was a solid impact enough to bruise a lesser man, but Daniel just smiled. I told them I was busy, Rose said. Busy doing what? Busy raising a family of 7, she said. And besides the tea, there is terrible. Daniel put his arm around her. Good choice. Inside the dome, behind the glass, they could see Milo chasing 4 chaotic furry toddlers through the tomato vines. Jax was yelling something about his wrench being stolen. Patch was floating above them, providing a running commentary on the probability of furniture damage. It was loud. It was messy. It was perfect. Rose leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. I do not have a womb, she said softly, an old joke between them now. But I have everything else. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Yeah, he said. You do. Above them, the aurora flickered, not threatening, just watching. A green curtain drawn over a house built on ice, but warm enough to last forever.